the Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
What they do at quarterback. Like, we have no idea what the smoke screen is there, where they go. We'll know a lot more after the draft with where New England's potentially headed. Speaking of wondering where teams are headed in the draft, Jarrett, case for and against the Pittsburgh Steelers going wide receiver in the first round.
The case for is they don't have a legitimate X receiver on the roster right now. George Pickens is awesome, but he's very much a deep threat and slant guy who can make the contested catches down the field. And if you put him in the slot and get him the ball quickly off the line of scrimmage, he'll get you some good yak yardage. But Pickens isn't a guy who's shown or known for, creating natural separation at the line of scrimmage. And they don't have another guy on that roster right now. So, Van Jefferson, Quez Watkins, Calvin Austin, that's not going to be the predominant number 2 in the offense. So if somebody like Brian Thomas is there and you really like him at 20, okay, cool. There's your other receiver. Case against is they have other needs on the offense. Center being arguably the biggest one. They don't have a starting center right now. They don't really have an NFL caliber center on the roster right now. So I think that the best thing that the Steelers could do in the first round is trade back. I think there's going to be teams, if Brian Thomas is there at 20, I would expect the Steelers to get a call from Brandon Beane and the Buffalo Bills to say, hey, let's work something out so we can get him. And if you're Pittsburgh, you can garner extra draft capital and only move back 8 spots and then take a tackle or take a center while also getting extra draft capital and maybe utilize that to trade up in the second round to get somebody else that you really like. I think that's the best case scenario for me as a Steelers fan as to what they should do. But if they like Brian Thomas and they end up taking him, or if they like A.D. Mitchell and end up taking him, I'm not going to be angry at that. But I think the best argument to make is that they should trade back in the draft to get as much capital as they can, get somebody late in the first round, and then package whatever they got from the previous trade and move up in the second round to get, whether that be a center, left tackle, or what have you.
Who do you like the most there? Is it Brian Thomas, or do you think when you think about Arthur Smith's scheme, what you have personnel wise, the rest of the receiver room and this, that, and the other, is it somebody else? Who is I guess it just also depends on who falls and who's there for Pittsburgh, but who would you personally hope is there for the taking at wide receiver if they go that route?
I mean, Brian Thomas would be a fine pick. Zach Zane, the new wide receivers coach, was at the Texas Pro Day and he took A.D. Mitchell and Xavier Worthy out for dinner. Just to, that's a Steelers staple at this point, is getting to know those guys that they go to see at Pro Days. So, I mean, if they really like A.D. Mitchell, cool. I would prefer Brian Thomas personally. But again, I don't think it's necessarily likely they go receiver in the first round just because of the other needs that I already mentioned. If Brian Thomas and Amarius Mims are both there, I think they go Mims. Just because of the way that this offense is going to operate. It's going to be, we know Arthur Smith's going to be, it's going to be a lot of outside runs. It's going to be a lot of relying on the tackles to create space on the outside and then set up play action. So if I had to pick what I would do, I think, like I said, trade down and get a tackle and then maybe try to package those other picks that you get in a trade to move up and get, a Zach Frazier from West Virginia if you can get him. Then right there, your 2 biggest issues on the offensive line are fixed, in theory, assuming that they both play well. So, but, like I said, if Brian Thomas ends up being the pick, I'm not going to be angry at that. That's a guy who can be really good at the next level. If A.D. Mitchell ends up being the pick, that's cool. If I would say Troy Franklin, I don't see that being the pick. They haven't shown any sort of pre-draft interest there. I think that if they do take a receiver, it's going to be either Brian Thomas or A.D. Mitchell.
Troy Franklin, I kind of I don't know what the Falcons do in this second, but he's someone that the Falcons have not had a player like Troy Franklin. And I don't know. JB, you just made a face. Troy Franklin, not for you. A, is that true? And then B, A.D. Mitchell or Brian Thomas, based on where Jarrett's at. Who do you think makes more sense for Pittsburgh?
No, not a big Troy Franklin fan at all. I think he is one-dimensional as a player, which is fine. Everybody can be a super deep threat. That can be your role, but it just feels like the hands are too inconsistent, the route tree is too inconsistent, and if you're just bringing speed to the table, that's fine, but you need for it to be a legitimate first round pick, you need to bring a little bit more to the table. If I were the Steelers in this situation, I think if Brian Thomas or A.D. Mitchell were there, or were both there, I would pick Brian Thomas. But I don't think either of them are necessarily a great fit for what they want. Steelers want to be offensively and what they already have on the roster. It feels like they're both very similar to George Pickens right now. So I wouldn't mind seeing them go tackle there and then on dates draft a guy like Ricky Pearsall, who works more of the in-between areas. Lad McConkey and George Pickens, just build the boat out of Georgia players.
I don't think Lad will be there. I think Lad's going to go. I think some like KC, Buffalo. I just feel like going to go late first. Someone's going to do it.
Lad McConkey to the Chiefs since like February.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be a thing that happens. It just makes too much sense.
Yeah. Do the Bills who? Because the Bills pick before Kansas City, right?
The Bills pick at 28.
I don't think
the Bills doing it just to keep him out of Kansas City would be petty and great.
I don't think that's going to be the guy for them. I think it's going to be A.D. Mitchell.
So you think they have to go receiver, right? Like after the Diggs trade, you just have to do it.
Not necessarily. I don't think you have to because of the overall depth of this class.
Yeah.
But I wonder how their board looks at 28. Like that's the perfect spot to pick one of those next receivers. Or, I mean, do the Julio Jones trade.
That's what I was going to say. I think Buffalo's a prime target to trade up with like Tennessee at 7 or Atlanta at 8 and just be like, look, we're going to send you a hell of a package because we want Roma dudes. And if you like it, then
is that the one you trade up for? Does that make the most sense for what Buffalo?
I think he's going to be I think he's going to be the one that's there. I don't know if Malik Nabers is going to be there. Marvin Harrison definitely isn't going to be there. It just depends. But if Roma
can you trade up to get Marvin? If Marvin drops past 4?
I mean, if you could trade up
Cardinals don't do it.
If you could trade up to 4 and do it, then I'd do it. But that's again, you got to give up a hell of a ton.
But you could do it.
You could do it theoretically. Yeah, definitely.
My pushback on the Bills trading up to draft a receiver is, I don't think Brandon Beane's going to trade up to draft a guy. I think they're more willing to pick where they are or trade back. I also kind of think that they are in the Kansas City. They're trying to be the 2022 to current day Kansas City Chiefs offensively and in roster construction, where they're trying to morph their offense on the fly and they're trying to build the plane as it's taking off. So I don't think they're going to trade up for a guy, but I think if a receiver is there at 28, like an A.D. Mitchell, who is very complimentary to the Bills receiver group, I think that would be a smart pick. I think a Javon Baker, day 2, if they decide to go somewhere else with their first round pick, because they still need bodies on the defensive side of the ball. They just need help there. So where they go at 28 is going to be really interesting.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas podcast. Hell yeah.